TyRuben Ellingson. I was the lead vehicle designer when it comes to the vehicles on planet, the mining equipment, the amp suit, the flying vehicles. Those were the things that I was focused on as a designer.
I'm Yuri Bartoli. I designed a bunch of creatures in the film and some environments and plant life. We all kind of had a bit of a hint of what it could be, and like, well, this is going to be something different. This is something nobody's ever seen before. I mean, Jim is one of those guys that he can pretty much do everything, but he's one man, and he knows, I think, inherently that he wants somebody to bring something new to the table. We would do stuff, he would come in and show it, he might sketch on paper, he'd show us some of his sketches, and then we'd go back and start, making some changes or going off on a couple of other tangents to try and explore a few things. And then you've got the design, it gets approved, Jim likes it, it's okay, it goes forward. But then it goes through a whole other process where a bunch of people come in and they inject life into it. And it becomes, like I said, something that is bigger than what you even thought of, like bringing it to life. Like some of the creatures, you think about it, you do the color, you do the sculpt, you think about all the little details, but then when the thing is moving and breathing and dripping sweat and running around and believable, it's this really surreal moment where you see something that you thought of become a reality on the screen, and it's a gratifying, strange, surreal feeling. You have a set number of tasks. It goes in chunks. They say, well, we need these creatures designed, so you work on those creatures. Then, there's this other creature somebody else designed, but we need the colors to be figured out for it because the ones that we have, it doesn't work for this scene, so we need another color pass on this. So you start working on that. And then as these things come up, you could say the first half is like building the airplane, and then the second half is problem solving and troubleshooting the airplane to make it fly better.
Things were added and refinements were made, and then of course in the production cycle things go into a place where lots of other designers are getting involved with detailing, and there's a lot of technical people, so it never really felt like it was finished as much as it was just ready to move along.
We went down some blind alleys. We got some designs that, of course, were not appropriate for the movie, but we could close those alleys off and go, okay, well, there's nothing down there.
It was a balancing act, I think, between, trying to give the very best you can and still staying within the framework of the story, and making sure that you're servicing Jim's vision for his movie. And so I think if there was anything that I remember that was sort of a mantra was, you can do better. You can always improve your own ability. There's an interesting thing with, in particular, the amp suit. What you see is that the humans, a 6-foot-tall human is dwarfed by the Na'vi. That's about 9 foot tall. So their physicality, the Na'vi's size and strength, and the fact that they're an alien being with these, super strong bones and super, capacities because of their long limbs and so forth, can really overwhelm a human. But then you go from the Na'vi to the amp suit, which, is a human driver's actions amplified by machine. Then suddenly they're 13, 14 foot tall, and their relationship to the Na'vi adult is very similar in scale from human to Na'vi, Na'vi to amp suit. So the difference in size is sort of flipped once Quaritch gets in the amp suit. It kind of flips the power structure, if you will. Jim had this really specific cadence of, human, Na'vi, amp suit. And so he talked about that relationship early, and that was one of the things we were kind of massaging all the way through the process. Each vehicle had a specific kind of role to play in the story. The Samson was basically a vehicle that was large enough to carry troops around, and that's large enough to carry the Na'vi around, and that had a certain kind of workhorse capacity. The Scorpion was a smaller attack vehicle, and that was really much more of a pure military statement. So right away, using this as an example, you have two vehicles that are similar because they're both flying vehicles. They both have the same kind of prop system, but they serve very different purposes. So, the designs need to kind of underscore what their role is in the movie, but at the same time, you don't want the audience to confuse the two. So you had to build in like some additional size on the Samson that made it have a slightly different silhouette so that you didn't confuse it with the smaller one, which was much more destructive and had all these weapons, and it was kind of bristling with all this different kinds of ordnance and machine guns and weapons of different kinds. Jim knew from the very beginning, as far as the flying vehicles go, that these were not like high-speed, fighting vehicles. They weren't like jets. They were much more about low flight in the canopy of the trees, and they actually had a kind of utilitarian quality. They were more in parallel to the kinds of activities that you'd see in a modern military with helicopters. We played around with ways to make it appear more futuristic, but that was more of an aesthetic kind of consideration. And at the end, Jim really helped, he really steered the whole thing back to something that had a vocabulary that again, served the story.
We're dealing with a lot of creatures that are pretty brightly colored, and it's not, dark and scary. It's bright and colored and full daylight. And very early on, there was a lot of discussions about he wanted a fractal layer of detail, where as you get closer and closer, you see more and more. It's not just that you have big, simple shapes, and then they're big, simple shapes when you get up close. Those big, simple shapes are made up of smaller, simple shapes, and then more and more complicated shapes. And I mean, at one point, I even took that literally. Like, I was working on these color textures for the Banshees, and we were putting in these very distinct patterns that had been worked out. And then trying to come up with a color and breakup, and having those patterns be breakup of little breakups. And so I ended up working on a very large file size, and then working in some sort of subtle fractal patterns that I had generated on the computer, and making that look like it had some sort of internal consistency and some sort of internal design process, evolutionary process driving everything. And one of the things that aided me was I went down to like some zoo or something and bought a toy frog, a little toy plastic frog. So then I got a photo of the same type of Amazon poison dart frog and stood them, put them next to each other. I'm like, that looks like real, and this looks like a toy. Now, they're both the same color, they're both the same brightness, they're the same shape, same surface texturing, bright, sort of highlights. What's the difference? And then I went and I looked at it, and it really was the little subtle details that you would think would be maybe 1 or 2% of the whole image, but that little extra, like the uncanny valley with CG,
Uncanny Valley. This is a hypothesis regarding the field of robotics and CGI. The theory holds that when robots and other facsimiles of humans look and act almost like actual humans, it causes a response of revulsion among humans and observers. The valley in question is a dip in the graph that represents the human reaction in response to CGI that is almost human. Basically, the theory says that the CGI or robot has to look either cartoony or 100% real to not repulse an actual human.
You need that little bit to really push the believability and make it acceptable. A lot of the trees in the forest, they have this sort of almost like a lizard-like skin texture, and you almost never notice it, but you pick up on it as a subliminal level of reality and strangeness. Overall, it's, there's trees, we have trees on Earth, but there's enough in there to give it this feeling of reality, even though it's an alien place.
I thought that the entire process actually amplified my capacities as a designer. You had to actually find in yourself the capacities to bring again and again to the table something that was, the very best that you had to bring. So it was like, give me the best and keep bringing the best. And that's a great place to do work.
It's a lot. It was a lot of fun.